Mercy sleeps in the shadows, a whispered redemption, a Heal Our World book by Suffering Well. Chapter 2, The Invitation. The coffee had gone cold, but he was still holding the cup. The Bible sat beside him on the step untouched. Frank had moved once in the last 2 hours, to shift his legs when they started to cramp. Otherwise, he stayed still, watching the street slowly come alive. Shopkeepers pulling up metal grates, a kid on a scooter skimming by with a trail of laughter, a man in a hurry muttering into his phone. No one looked at him. Ken had returned, same jacket, same beard, same way of walking like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere but here. He didn't carry anything in his hands this time, just a canvas bag slung over his shoulder and that same kind of quiet that made Frank feel seen but not inspected. Frank stared at him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, not even to himself, he didn't look away. You read any of it? Ken nodded toward the Bible. Frank shook his head. I've read enough before. Ken didn't push, just sat beside him, close enough to matter, but not enough to feel threatening. Yeah, he said, sometimes too much reading can blind you to what's real. Frank's brow furrowed. Ken smiled like he'd said something amusing to himself. I used to think God was hiding from me, Ken said. Turns out I was just always looking past him. Frank said nothing. A car rolled by, music too loud, bass rattling the air. He glanced at the Bible. It was a standard issue New Testament, the kind they hand out to soldiers in hotel drawers. He ran his fingers over the cover. Soft leather, cracked at the spine. Someone had written a name in the front. To whoever needs this most. Well, Frank said, clearing his throat, I guess you found me. Ken looked at him sideways. Or maybe he did. It was 2 days later when Ken showed up with the other man. Frank had been thinking about running. He always thought about running when something felt too warm, too safe, too near. It was easier to disappear than to be disappointed. People didn't stick around, not really. But that morning, he stayed. The new man was older, tall and straight-backed, even though his shoulders looked heavy with years. His voice was warm butter and soft gravel. He introduced himself as Ronald, but didn't offer a handshake, just looked Frank in the eye and said, You hungry? Frank was always hungry, but this was a different question. He nodded anyway. Ronald gestured toward his car, an old brown sedan that still smelled like fresh coffee and lemon oil. I got a pot of stew on at home. You're welcome to come if you'd like. No strings. Frank stood slowly, heart thudding like a warning. He picked up his bag. The Bible was inside. Ronald's trailer felt like it had been waiting for him. It was nothing fancy, small, a little cluttered, the kitchen too narrow and the chairs too soft, but it smelled like warmth, like rosemary and garlic and something sweet simmering on the back burner. Frank hovered in the entryway. A black lab with a red collar trotted in from another room, ears flopping as she made her way over to Ronald's feet. Frank could see her name printed in bold letters on the collar, Penny. She looked up at Frank with deep, curious eyes, then gave one slow wag of her tail before settling on the rug like she'd already decided to trust him. Frank watched her with a strange kind of ache in his chest. Animals usually avoided him, too tense, too damaged. But this one, she just looked at him like he was normal. Ronald handed him a bowl. Stew. There's bread on the counter. Eat as much as you like. Frank sat, slowly, as if a trap might spring. The stew was hot. Potatoes, carrots, maybe lamb. Every bite tasted like the kind of love no one talks about, the practical kind. Chopped, stirred, seasoned, given without comment. Ronald and Ken didn't ask his story. They didn't offer pity. Instead, they talked about books and dogs and the weather and how the world needed more porch swings and fewer opinions. Frank found himself listening, then talking, then laughing. And when Ronald stood up to get the tea, Frank noticed the worn Bible on the side table by the windowsill. He looked away, but the image stuck in his mind like a song he hadn't heard in years. That night, Ronald gave him the guest room. It included Penny. It had clean sheets, and Penny climbed up onto the bed like she belonged to him. He looked around. It had a fan that hummed, and a lamp with a beaded shade that glowed amber like a warm memory. Frank lay on top of the bedspread, eyes wide in the dark. Penny moved next to him, and he naturally put an arm over her. She pressed against him like she knew he needed her. The Bible was beside him. He opened it for the first time. The paper whispered. His eyes fell on a verse. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. He closed the book, buried his face in Penny's fur, and for the first time in years, he wept.